Just to kick off very briefly, just to add some context for corporate sponsorship in very general terms, it has surprisingly increased since 2007. I was pleasantly surprised to find this out. Since 2007, twice as many corporates have increased their donations as have decreased them. Good news. The bad news relates to the FTSE 100 lot. They tend to give less than 1% of their annual pre-tax profit away in charitable stuff. The average is a not very impressive 0.7%. Grim. Moving on. How do they give their resources away? I think it's probably a very important question to answer right at the start. Obviously there's cash, which is fantastic. It tends to come with fewer obligations than some of the trusts and foundations money does as well. Obviously, you've got sort of pro bono advice and support if you're looking to get kind of accountancy advice to set you up in sort of small charities, small enterprises, or as an individual. That can be useful admin to explore. There's also the in-kind support in terms of materials and things like that. Networking and the network support. I think this has been quite a common theme from everyone this evening, right? You have a kind of pool of people you can ask at the start, and I'll return to this with kind of how-to guide bit, but I would advise that getting hold of people's networks and how they can put you in touch with other people who might be able to help you with whatever you need is well worth exploring right at the outset. Publicity and exposure, all good. Profile building, getting your message, your work, what you do out there, fantastic. And similarly, kind of part of this is the opportunity to market yourself to new audiences or to reach people who you might not otherwise reach through your peer groups. So, all good there. I think it's worth also exploring what artists and artistic organisations offer potential corporate sponsors. Firstly, I think that creativity and artistic vision and all the kind of skills that come with that, and I think perhaps you feel slightly hackneyed thinking, well, of course I have kind of vision, creative skills and so on. Most of these organisations don't have. They tend to kind of lose vitality, especially as they get bigger and bigger and more kind of deprived of any input. Obviously, they like things like brand associations. They can identify with you as an artist or with you as an artistic organisation. Social goods, again, rather hacking terms, it does help them, and it does help them kind of change public perceptions of them from kind of money-grabbing organisations to ones that have slightly more of a social conscience. It's been very interesting doing the Thames Festival work. It's been alluded to. One of the people who support them is an investment company, and they support a kids' choir who every year perform to sort of sing songs about water. There's no kind of direct link, perhaps, but it just helps them report back to the community at large that they're not just a kind of giant money factory, which people don't surprisingly tend to prefer to identify with in the corporate world. Finally, there's perhaps a point here about artists and smaller organisations is a kind of journey that you can go through with sponsors and supporters. Corporate organisations like to be able to talk about journeys. They like to be able to tell their wider networks that they've worked with such and such, and it's transformed their reach, ability to do work, their profile. And for them, working with individuals or small organisations, there's a much greater chance. We started working with an artist fresh out of art school and supported their work and helped them cover their costs. And they've now got this fantastic exhibition program. They sell work in such and such a prestigious place. You can't do that with a big organisation. The NSPCC, who are again another kind of charity just around the corner who I used to work for, do have corporate partnerships, but that's a very different kind of reason. It's very much about kind of children, you like children. There's no chance to do that journey, whereas you have a unique advantage that you can kind of go, here we are, this is where we can go in 2 to 3 years. There is an important point. Yes, you're offering them a lot already that they want. It is a very transactional relationship with sponsors. Yes, they're giving you money, resources, time, whatever. They will want to see something at the end of that, and that can be quite restrictive. So I think something to bear in mind right at the outset when you're considering applying for support for what you do, or your organisation does, to a corporate sponsor is how willing are you or how able are you to be straitjacketed by their reporting requirements and their need to see that you've reached X many people through such and such a channel. You need to be able to record your progress as you go along. It's the sort of thing that many of you probably got experience of doing with trusted foundations or things like that, where they want to see your monitoring evaluation. The same rules apply. Don't kind of get fooled into thinking they won't want to hear what you've done with their money at the end. Probably time to move on into what works in terms of how to get hold of people and how to get hold of their money. Finding sponsorship for individuals without the backing of a registered charity is undoubtedly tough. Falling topical puns and artists and artistic organisations are better together than they are alone. Awful note, thank you. There are some models of kind of organisations supporting individual artists. Things like Rolex have a sort of sponsorship organisation that's very linked into what they want to be high profile, shiny brands almost. So composers like Gustav Dudner, who is admittedly associated with the El Sistema Orchestra, so disadvantaged children in Venezuela, that is still fundamentally on top of this game. So individual relationships are tricky, but not impossible. An important point to flag now about corporates moving slightly touched on the FTSE 100 information is they tend to give to kind of peer organisations, so that giant companies will tend to give to big, well-established charities. What that tends to be for smaller organisations or individuals on their own is thinking locally or very much within your field of practice is undoubtedly a better way to go. You need to kind of establish common links, and if that's geography, or if you're an artist who works primarily in film, if it's the technology that's associated with that and production of that, then do kind of trade on those links when you're starting out. So, the first stage that we always go through when we're advising organisations that come to us and say, how do we get money from companies, is first of all to establish who you know. Those are the open doors that it's well worth pushing at. Again, I know we've touched on this with things like Kickstarter campaigns and so on. You've got a slight advantage over that when you're going to companies because you're not asking the individual themselves to put their hands in their pockets. You're trying to build kind of advocates within organisations. So do go on LinkedIn, go through your contacts. Do you know anyone who's a trustee of anything, a patron, a director? Do you know anyone who works on CSR and sponsorship team? And have conversations with those people. They are invaluable if you know them. If not, they are people well worth tracking down through company websites and making initial contact with. Probably the next thing really is to work out what's this required. Fundamental thing really is what do you actually want, and that slightly touches on the point that you need money, you need contacts, you need materials. Having done that, you're then able to start formulating what you're asking for, and that's valuable. You never want to kind of on the phone to someone saying, I want to do this, that, and the other. Fantastic. We'd like to give you some money. What is it you need? You turn around and go, we actually need that. What we need something else. How do you go about finding the companies? Again, this is, I'm just going through it. Basic terms, because it's something we find organisations often have done. Thames Festival Trust, who I've been working with recently, the first thing we did with them, they're supported by London First, really business organisation for London. The first thing we did with them was go through the list of London First members, work out anyone who was based by the river, had any conceivable interest in art or culture, and drew up a list. And went, right, these are the people we want to talk to. Other resources, I'm not in that position. Local councils are still worth talking to for things like this. I know that obviously arts officer posts are being slashed and burned essentially across the entire country, but there will be people at councils who are willing to put you in touch with local business networks. They want to promote their area not just as a good place to do business, but more than as a good place to live. And the arts, arts-related work, so education, community outreach, they are invaluable for creating those messages. So do talk to people in local councils, even if they have no money. They will be delighted to kind of say, come along and talk to some of our business breakfasts, tell us more about what we do. I think that's crucial. An organisation I work with in Telford and Stoke, who run kind of music education programs in schools, went along to the Telford District Council business breakfast. It sounds really exciting. But it worked. They did manage to get hold of some developers who came along and said, this sounds fantastic, it fits with what we want to do. We had no idea you were there. When we signed, what we do with money. Kind of aligned to that, I don't know how many of you have come across the local enterprise partnerships, or the LEPs. Again, the London one is a slightly tricky piece, but anyone who's based outside London or works outside London is well worth getting to know those organisations. Do draw on things like yellow pages as well, and go through and work out who are based in your area. It can be that fundamental on that basis. Also, look at the sort of competitor organisations. If you've got someone in your area who you think is interested, look at who works in the same field as them. They may very well have very similar interests. For example, with TENS, one of the things that's really changed since I got in January is we started out with one development, slowly sort of spread. So they managed to get support from one business. But did anyone see the HIPPO, the joint HIPPO that they did in TENS? That was supported by one of the developers across all islands. So one of the things we've taken from that is that next year, a lot more developers are going to feature very prominently on the list of people looking to approach the money. Thinking about industries in the case for artists, we've obviously touched on things like accountants, studio providers, people that specialise in looking after artists and artistic organisations. Do have a look at that, see what they do. If you're giving them lots of money already, it's possibly time to look at something back. One of my colleagues works with English National Opera, and she's currently going through all of their utilities products. Because Opera House is very expensive to run, they hand out vast sums of money every year in gas, electricity and so on. And they're actually kind of saying, well, kind of think after 10 years of taking our money, you might want to think about giving something back. Similarly, organisations that look after artists. I know the kind of art collector world again has its kind of ethical issues that come with it, but do have a look at organisations that support artistic production and so on. Art insurers, high net worth wealth managers, they want to be seen to have the same interests as the people who are buying from them. And if that means that they want to support an artist occasionally, then it's well worth exploring that way. Finally, obviously look at the people advertising in art magazines and things like Freeze, the FT, How to Spend It. Who's advertising in there? Two reasons. One, they've obviously got an interest in the arts. Two, they've obviously got money to spend on building their profile and getting their messaging out there. They are really nice prospects to investigate. Having gone through your list, and I would suggest doing long lists on Excel of companies who you know there, who the key contacts might be, whether that's CSR managers, sponsorship managers, someone you know, what you're going to them for, then it's time to kind of fundamentally ask yourself, how do you match what they want to achieve? And this can feel like a very wearisome process, but it is one that is well worth going through. The more of their boxes you can tick, the easier you make the job of the person you approach to recommend it to their boss or through the kind of whatever the assignment process is, and the more chance you have of finally extracting something well worth your while from them. For example, again, the Thames Festival, they have a worldwide education program that's called Rivers of the World. We're currently in discussions with a bank that has a particular interest in water and water in the developing world, which is where this program primarily takes place alongside London. Again, there's a really nice link there. The meeting's tomorrow. I'm crossing all my fingers. We'll see how it goes. Finally, having worked out where you're going, what you're going for, who you're going to, it's very much time to pick up the phone. I would always phone people rather than email. Again, it sounds really, really basic, but it's much, much easier to ignore an email than it is to ignore a phone call. You've also got that much better chance that people will let slip information about priorities that isn't publicly available, which you can then turn to your own advantage. Having had that call, and you won't be able to make a pitch. I think beforehand, it's always well worth having a script to hand that you practice, so you can imagine going through it with someone on the phone. Don't just pick up the phone and hopefully kind of natural inspiration will take hold. I've done that. It doesn't work. It leads to some very awkward silences if the other end of the phone. I wouldn't advise it. Once you've done that, you'll then into the kind of follow-up process. More often than not, people will say that they're happy to look at something, which is obviously fantastic. Give yourself kind of written document. What you want to do with that, I would say, is to explain who you are or what you or your organisation does, why it's great, your track record, whether that's something like media appearances, whether you have kind of social media assets that play on, whatever, who you reach. You then want to go into why you align with them, and this is why it's always worth having done this beforehand. Anything new that comes out of the phone call, if someone says, oh, fantastic, we're looking to really renew what we do with artists this year, there's a chance in there to go. Company A is at the start of a really exciting journey, working with new professional artists. I or we, have a fantastic track record, how will be part of. You then need to get into what you're asking for. I would set that out really, really clearly. If it's a sponsorship and there's a chance to reclaim things like VAT on it, do make that clear at the outset. I had a terrible moment where I sent a proposal off where I spent all weekend thinking, I haven't completed the VAT on this. That was a big mistake. Another lesson there, you proof before you send it. That's that first stage. That's that relationship established. From there on in, it's a case of following up. These people, however large the company, if you're going to a small company, and if you're an individual or a small artistic company, small companies are best. They have that kind of clear understanding. They know what your challenges are like, because they're probably very similar to their own. You'll know that those people will be very busy, but do keep chasing them up on the phone, making sure they've read stuff, making sure they get back on it, asking if there's anything more you can give them. From there on in, it's really a case of building relationship. If you have anything you can invite people along to, that's fantastic. The more you can get people to come along and see what you do and how you do it is absolutely magic. Again, one of the jobs we've done in Thames this year has been to build in a really coherent program of cultivation efforts around what they do. So they have this month-long Macedo Thames, and one of the things we've done is go through and pick the kind of key highlights and how they can entertain or welcome people. Again, if you're an individual, perhaps, and you have a show on, do bring along, invite along people who you're talking to about support. They might come, they might love it, they might be really keen to get involved. I think that's really the kind of key basics for how to do it. Something out. Obviously, starting small does have its advantages in terms of what you're asking for, whether that's in kind or in cash terms. It can lead to a really nice relationship that grows and matures over time and ends up in more resources and hopefully more money. Planning is key though, and I can't reiterate enough this message that you need to be able to communicate really clearly why your work deserves support, why it stands out over and above people around you. I find the kind of competition element around this very hard to do as well, but it is one that is key. It does help you make your training really persuasive. Why I need this money, why I should give it, what I'll do with it. And then really be very clear about what you're able to give back as well. Corporate sponsorship does, to a certain extent, rest really on what you're able to give them. That might be invitations to shows, so on and so forth, but do think through what you can do. Social media promotion, shows, so on and so forth. That's me.